Welcome back to the program. Our next conversation is one that centers on policy formulation and communication. Joining us in our studio to discuss this is a governance and policy strategist, Ayinde Olalekan, who joins us now on the program. Good morning to you, Olalekan, or should I just say Lekon?
Lekon, please. Good morning.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
You're looking sharp, I must say.
Thank you very much.
Very patriotic in some sorts.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Now, the conversation is policy formulation and communication.
Yes,
to start with, particularly in an age where we have to carry younger viewers along, when we talk about policy, let's break it down as though we're in an elementary class. What is policy, and what should prioritize policies formulated in any government?
Okay, so basically, I think the first key to any policy creation is data. So before you create a policy, you have to collect data to be able to define the specifics of the target of the policies. So for instance, maybe I want to create a policy regarding maybe a vehicle, for instance. I need to understand what exact type of vehicle. Is it a truck? Is it a car? Is it a monster truck, as the case may be? And then based on that, once I get the data that, okay, this is the need I'm trying to feed, then I go back to the drawing board and begin to create targeted policies to specifics. This is exactly what the policy is supposed to address. And that's the basis for policy formulation. So policy is like the building blocks of a society. So basically, policy does three things. First, it is that it prevents problems. Second is that it tries to avert problems, and then the third is try to solve problems. So you basically do it on at those levels where before the problem arises, we already created a buffer to solve the problem, and then even if the problem eventually arises, there's already a level playing field to solve the problem. So that's the basics about policy creation. It has to be targeted towards a specific purpose, and it has to be at the heart. The people has to be at the heart of the policy. Any policy you create without considering the needs of the people is a policy that is dead on arrival.
Well, quite interestingly, in summarizing, development policies are geared towards bettering the lives of people. So there's supposed to be a set of intentions and actions to bring about the policy in that regard.
Absolutely.
I know it goes through a cycle. Would you care to take us through the policy cycle and how important it is in terms of formulation and communication?
Okay, so basically, like I said earlier, three things. First is, before you create a policy, the cycle is this. So we identify a need. This is the specific need that we want to address. Second is, you don't create a policy without involving people. See, any policy you create...
More like stakeholder engagement?
Exactly, stakeholder engagement. Any policy you create that the people are not directly involved, they are most likely not to be loyal, or they are most likely not to be not going to participate in the implementation of that policy. So it has to involve the people. The people has to be the core of the policy creation, because you see, you don't create policies one way. You know, there's been this argument about the Nigerian constitution, how that, you know, some people just sat together and then wrote a policy and then just dumped it over the country, and then for many years we've just been going back and forth and up and down and everything, and you know. So right now, I think the Patriots, that's what the name is, led by, I think, Mekayoko or something. Now they have all come together and say, you know what, we need to rewrite the history of this country, and we need to do it our own way. So what they're doing basically is, let's sit down on the table, bring everybody together, and let's discuss the nitty-gritty. What are the things that affect this country, the daily needs of every Nigerian? We bring everything to the table. Based on that, we come up with a policy document and say, we the people, because you see, the 1999 constitution, there's no we in that constitution. You understand? So everybody's coming together to the drawing board and say, now, we the people. The reason why the word WE is used is because everybody is involved. The old, the young, the people living with disability, even a child unborn. The policy had to go into the future. So the policy has to address three basic things: the past, the present, and the future. Any policy you create that the cycle doesn't have these three nitty-gritty is a policy that is going to fail. It will collapse like a pack of cards.
Now, one key thing you've mentioned is data collection. many continue to fault the lack of a population census since 2006 in the country as not having the up-to-date date in terms of the statistic required to plan efficiently for the governance required in a country as populated as Nigeria. Yes, how important is this in this conversation?
Okay, so data is the center of everything. You see, a government that does not plan with data is like a captain, like a pilot that is flying a plane blindfolded. You need data to do anything. And you see, when we talk about data in Nigeria, it's a capacity thing. Two, it's a lack of focus. Because the truth of the matter is, if you don't bring data collection into bear, you'll find out that there is absolutely nothing you'll be able to do accurately. You won't be able to do anything accurately. You have to get to a point where you would, data is basically everything. Data is basically everything. You cannot formulate policies without data. You cannot even, okay, so take for instance the social, I forgot the social intervention. The social intervention plan. That's the one done by late President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of ups and downs. Oh, the numbers, the you know, it wasn't just adding up. Now. A government brought out a policy to solve the people's problems, and people started debating about, oh no, I think we have more people down in up north. Oh, there are more people down south. No. Now, if you had data, that would have solved a lot of problems. Oh, X amount of people from the north we're targeting X amount to. You understand what I mean? So data gives you this. It helps you to plan with details and with specifics. You can never go wrong with numbers. And that is exactly what data is. You can't go wrong with data. You cannot go wrong with numbers.
Now, we've talked about being able to identify the needs of the people. We've talked about being able to design a policy intended to create change in the areas of deficit. Now, more particularly is in its implementation. Okay. When you have a policy, what are the key components of ensuring that it is in somewhat implemented to the best way that it changes the life and quality of life of people?
Okay, so I'll answer this question this way. Very interesting question, by the way. You see, everything rises and falls on leadership. If you create a data for a weak leader, if you create a data for a weak a policy for a weak leader, you would find that that policy is going to struggle. I'll say it this way: the way Miles Monroe of blessed memory would always say that an army of sheep led by a lion can never defeat an army of a lion led by a sheep. So what that means is you need the leader to have the capacity to be able to follow through the policies that are created. Once you have a leader that does not have the capacity, and you know, in this country we have a lot of leadership capacity gap, because it's the leader that drives the policy. Let me give you an instance. If a leader comes and puts his foot on the ground and say, you know, when President Muhammadu Buhari of blessed memory became president, I remember what happened that morning. I was driving out of my house and I saw a Chinese company with some black staff at a traffic light trying to fix the traffic light, and I noticed that I saw that across every junction, like almost every junction I got to in Abuja. He was just sworn in as president, has not said the word. Do you know why? Because everybody perceives that man to be someone that is very stern. Is a military styled kind of leader, and he was not going to take nonsense. That he had not said a word, but the communication had gone into the country. That is because of capacity. That is capacity on display. Of course, there are a lot of dynamics afterwards, but once people know that this leader would never take is a no-nonsense kind of person, then I can be rest assured that that policy that you're creating in that space will definitely work.
Well, one example that might reckon with a few, God rest his soul. Let's bring it to current day reality, because we've talked about policy design, we've talked about implementation. For me, there are two other key components. It's adoption of the policy as well, and evaluation. Take, for instance, post-subsidy in Nigeria. The current government of the day said that on the alternative to help Nigerians cushion the effect of subsidy removal, there will be a deployment of the compressed natural gas initiative. Now, the adoption of such a policy remains a lot to be desired. Using that as a case study, what could have been done better in terms of the implementation of, say, the CNG policy and its adoption?
So I wouldn't deny the fact that this administration needs to do more about communication of policies, particularly like, okay, for instance, the one you just mentioned right now. See, I remember Ben Morebus at the Senate at I think the 9th or 8th Senate, when he came up and said, okay, he wants Nigeria, they want to pass, he wanted to pass, was sponsoring a bill to ban vehicles, to ban a few powered vehicles and switch to electric vehicles. They practically shut him down. Fast forward to 2025, everybody's running around and, okay, you know what, we need to start getting electric vehicles and stuff like that. So the truth of the matter is, when you create a policy, CNG for an instance, there's a way you trickle it down to the society. It has to go through every single branches of the society. Oh, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to do it. You know, so I think what happens is people create policy and then it stays at the top level. And then you don't trickle it down to the people within the subnationals and even the locals. So here is a CNG policy. We're talking about it. Oh yeah, it's a fantastic policy. Some people still don't know what CNG is as of now. So it needs to be broken down into the language people understand. Let me digress a little bit. I have never seen, I don't know if it exists, but I've not seen the Nigerian constitution written in Yoruba, in English, in Yoruba, in Igbo, in the 250 something languages that have been spoken. That is exactly what policy communication is all about. I write a policy, I make sure that even to the child in my house, the language that he or she understands, that policy is brought down to that level.
Now this perceived communication gap, whose responsibility is it to communicate this to Nigerians in languages of diversity?
I would say, okay, maybe the National Orientation Agency, being the spearhead, they be the ones that are supposed to spearhead or communicate things like that to the people. But you see, when it comes to communication, now we live in a digitized age. Yeah, it is everybody's responsibility. See, your mode of communication is different from mine. As you walk down the street, I talk to 10 people, the mode of communication are different. So as an expert or as the head agency, what we're supposed to sit down and do is, okay, so the president has created a policy on CNG. How can we trickle this down to everybody in the society, to the local government, to people in the subnationals, to people living with disability, people that can't even talk or can't even hear or speak? How do we communicate that policy to them if you don't have a well thought through and thorough plan that can accommodate all these people? Then that policy is going nowhere. It's going nowhere. So the national, the NOA, it's their responsibility. And it brings me back to what I said earlier. You see, capacity is everything. If you have a leader that is very detailed, that is thorough, that deals with the granular details, you find out that by the time you begin to scale it down from level to level, it's going to get to the people's homes. Oh, CNG everywhere. You publish it everywhere on the dailies, on the nationals and everything. And I also need to add this. You see, we're never going to go anywhere when we always think everything has to be done by the government. The responsibility of the government is to create an enabling environment. Your responsibility as a citizen is to get the news and also spread the news.
Now as much as it's very important to communicate the gains of a policy, creating an enabling environment, particularly with policies that require high investments, is it in timelines? What could have been better done to generate the interest of PPPs in implementing this policy?
Okay, so you can't ask for a hand when there is no emotional deposit. You see, one of the arts, the skill of government, of governance, is being able to appeal to the sensibilities and the emotions of the people. Why do you think, okay, so let me give you an example. I think after the World War II, Nestle wanted to flood the Japanese market with coffee. I'm sure you must have heard that story before. And then guess what they did? They tried to sell coffee to the Japanese government and the Japanese people, and they rejected it because they didn't like coffee. Do you know what they did? They introduced coffee candies for little kids in school. You know, candies is always sweet. Any flavor, kids will definitely have it. You know, and then they just flooded the entire market with coffee candies. And 30 years after that, they flooded the Japanese market with coffee. And as I speak to you right now, I think Japan does, I think, about 500,000 tons. They import 500,000 tons of coffee right now. Do you know what? Of course, they consulted an expert in marketing and told them that, you know what, you can never sell a product that does not appeal to the emotions of the people. So here's what they did basically. They started with the younger ones and they started to introduce coffee bit by bit. Now coffee became emotional, an emotional brand. And by the time we introduce the actual coffee, and then it's all over Japan now. So basically, this is what I'm saying. Any policy that you create that does not appeal to the needs of the people, the sensibility of the people, and the emotions of the people, that policy is not going anywhere. So the responsibility is, I want to create a policy. The first thing is not just to announce it. It is, okay, how do we get this thing to appeal to people? We begin to sell them. So a handshake, and then people are going to accept whatever policy you want to create for them.
Now this leaves room for evaluation. It's an evaluation that, you know, it hasn't carried quite the required intentions or brought about the results as intended. Where do we get a revision of this cycle? How does the government begin to revise and take notes of where they need to retweak the agenda and get it right?
Okay, so basically, the first is the government needs to go back to the table, to the drawing board, and the need of the people has to be in the heart of everything government is going to do. I give credit to His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Adekunle Tinubu for all the policies he's rolling out across board. He's like building several pillars of a building at the same time. Yeah, but there's a communication gap, and it's simple. All the heads of government, agency, departments, and everything need to come together and say, you know what, beyond creating this policy, we need to communicate these policies to the people. And it's very simple. Stakeholders, it is very key. The stakeholders, I cannot make a rule for you that you wouldn't even need. So I need to consult with you. Okay, so let me give you an example of what I'll just quickly spin in this example. So I wanted to create a policy also I was consulted by a firm to do a policy by the chairman. Oh, we have problems here and everything. I'm tired of staff and everything. I'm like, okay, no problems. I got to the company and I was, okay, everybody, let's sit down on the table. So now, I understand that we have these issues and everything. So what I did was we reintroduced the policy on the table and requested for everybody's input. Oh, okay, so late coming, what do you think we should do? Oh, I think we should put a biometric on the door. I think we should do it this way. Okay, we'll put it together. By the time we're done with that policy, I basically read it to everybody. So these are the policy we have created. And we all agreed that we're going to be bound by this rules. Yes, and everybody went. And that solved the problem of maybe 5 years of an entire establishment. The point is, every agency that is doing something remarkable, you need to bring in the people to understand the languages that you need to meet people at the point. So for instance, I have a TV in my house, but go down the north, go to some remote areas, what they do is transistor radios. So how do you break down this policy to target those people? So you first of all collect data. Second, you know, the means of people's communication. My own means of communication by the way of phone. Another person is radio, another person is TV. People are visual, people are more audible, oriented and stuff like that. So your policy must target all of these demographics so that it can reach them effectively. So basically you come to the table, sit down, and then begin to look at channels that can appeal, that is reachable by the people. You don't create a policy and want to communicate it and then you go through a channel where it's just only for the few, the elites. You understand what I mean? So basically you have to break the policy down across all levels. This is how you want to communicate it. Okay, so 50% of the population, maybe by media, 70% can be reached. Okay, so let's go to the subnational. Okay, we can do maybe 20%. Let's go to the bay of radio. Then some people, okay, 10% is print media. And then your policy has to go across those communication channels. That is when we know that you are ready to do what you're supposed to do in policy communication. So it has to be broken down to reach everybody at the various phases where they are in life.
Now, you cited the marketing with curfew using Japan as a case study. You've talked about advantages of being in a digital age. Now, with public policies in current day Nigeria, the youth seem to be a common denominator in this conversation. How do we engender increased youth participation in conversations around policies?
Okay, I think youth participation is actually high when it comes to policy communication. But you see, what we need to do is to refocus the target. Bad news spreads a lot. Now, if you go on social media right now, what trends is things that are not really palatable. Oh, a disaster happened somewhere, it goes viral, and stuff like that. So the truth of the matter is, we first of all need to educate young people on the national values. This country belongs to young people. And then if you turn your face away from the things that are happening in the country, at the end of the day, you will not be able to build the country that you want. So first is, we need to shift the narrative for young people that Nigeria belongs to you. You have to build the Nigeria that you want. So in essence, anything that has to do with that can market the country, that can sell the country, that can sell the policies of the country, those are the things that you should invest in, as opposed to creating content that can only put some money in your pocket. So you find out that naturally young people are not particularly interested in marketing this country or marketing the things that can promote this country. It's just now that we're trying to change the narratives here and there and everything. So we need to encourage young people to ensure that, you know what, this country belongs to you and it is in your best interest. The same thing you do with your phone, or you go to the streets, create content and everything. Create a content about of course, I give it to some of the entertainers, the top musicians, in the secular and stuff like that. Some of them would go out and then would speak about the country boldly, would market the country, would market the pride of the country and everything. But a vast majority of young people are not just interested in the project Nigeria. And the country belongs to you. Incidentally and apparently, you don't have another country. So we need to encourage young people to market this country the more, in any way you can. Market the country the more.
Now back to the core focus, which is on policy formulation. We just touched on the background.
Yes, sir.
The other technical components as to policy formulation, and it also has to do with the legislature, as it were, where bill becomes law. Particularly, these are part of the constitutional duties of the legislature. Talking about it from that administrative angle, how key is the role of the National Assembly in this process?
Okay, so National Assembly create laws and formulate policies basically, and then of course have to pass it into law as the case may be. Yeah, but the National Assembly is at the center of policy formulation. But you see, the National Assembly does not exist without the will of the people. They do not exist without the will of the people, because ideally the National Assembly goes in to represent the people. So it's the people's policy that the National Assembly is supposed to create. When you find a National Assembly that is creating policy that is against the will of the people, then that is not a National Assembly. It is something else. I don't want to call it. You understand? So the National Assembly is a very vital institution in policy creation. But you see, if you don't put the will of the people at the center of the policy that you're creating at the National Assembly, then it wouldn't make any sense at all.
Now it leaves a big question to be answered. The big question is, who implements policy? When we talk about the role of the National Assembly and how, yes, of course, legislative activities bring about bills transiting to law, policies formulation, but that big question of whose responsibility it is to implement policies, how would you answer that?
So the responsibility is, because the people, so here's how it works. We identify a challenge or a problem or a need, and then we say, okay, so for this need to take us forward to the future, we need to create like a bubble around it that can protect whatever it is, protect the pathway to the future. And then we create policies. The policies, like the bubble wrap, we put around that, okay, don't do this. This is how we're going to work around this. When we get here, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're not going to do. It forms a policy. Now, the people are the policy is created for the people, but the people is at the center of implementing the policy, and it's about agreeing. So we create a policy that we don't want to. Okay, so we want to work on timelines. Oh, we hear this thing called African time, Nigerian time, So how do we move away from that narrative? So everybody in Nigerian citizens, you have to be early, you have to be timely, you have to be punctual, and everything, and we all agree. Then it now comes down to the implementers themselves. So every family, every company. As a matter of fact, if I'm going to respond to that question straightforward, it is the responsibility of the family first. Everybody lives in the family. Oh, this is the new policy. Don't do this, don't do this. Then second is through the schools and institutions. In schools and institutions, recently Burkina Faso is doing something remarkable. Remarkable. The president, who everybody feels is a military leader, created a policy called Faso Umbo. Faso Umbo means that, nobody is going to build Burkina Faso for us. We will build Burkina Faso by ourselves. So he basically created a policy of we, the people, will create our country. Guess what happened? Everybody are on the streets. I don't know if you've seen the recent videos from Burkina Faso, building roads, carrying bricks. People would leave their clothes from work and go to the street and level sand, push a bit of wheelbarrow of laterite, supply water. People that I saw a story of an old woman, about 70-year-old woman. She basically went to her house, put some things together on her farm, sold, and then brought some food and came to give to the people that were walking on the streets. You understand? So that is ownership. There has to be a sense of ownership in the policy creation. Those are the factors that implement policies. So it goes from the institution, goes through to the family level, the government level, in the churches and the mosques, in every phase of the society. Those are the factors that ensures that those policies are stuck to. Because if you don't break it down like that, you find out it just begins to fall as well. One of the things that makes policies weak in this country is, you see, people think that the policies exist for some level of people and does not exist for another level of people. So for instance, you see maybe a politician driving a convoy through a traffic light, and then he just moves through the traffic, breaks the red line. So an average citizen thinks, okay, you know what, if Mr. Senator or Mr. Governor or Mr. House of Rep, honorable member can break that traffic, I can as well do the same. Yeah, but when we all own the policy and say, you know what, we need to put our foot on the ground and make sure that we stick to this policy, then everybody will align.
Now, I know you've talked about the role of we the people starting at the smallest unit of society, but overarchingly, when we look at policy from an organizational perspective, it's the role of MDAs, Ministries and Departments of Governance.
Yes,
quite recently, I'd like to narrow our focus now in the next half of this conversation to the current administration.
Okay.
The President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration came up with the Nigerian First policy, one that looks to engender a prioritization of made in Nigerian goods and patronize homegrown solutions in general. Now, there have been some of the areas itemized on how this would trickle across MDAs. For the benefit of our viewers, would have some of this on screen as well. Take, for instance, the Nigerian First policy in itself. In your opinion, is it achievable? If it is indeed achievable, what's the timeline? When do you see a shift in mindset, much like the Japan example, of a generation that already prioritizes foreign-made products to begin to think Nigeria in homegrown solutions and in prioritizing the Nigerian First policy?
So it's first, I remember, I think that started happening since the last administration, where when you go to FEC meetings, or maybe when they're having a dinner at the villa, you find out that across all the table you will not find any foreign item, foreign drinks, foreign nothing. So it starts with Nigerians owning Nigerians or Nigerians products. Yeah, so if you, for instance, decide that I would rather patronize a local item than go for foreign. It starts with the individual, and of course I'm still going to narrow back to the fact that it also goes across board. You can't achieve the Nigerian first on a lopsided scale. It's never going to work. It's when you approach it from the top, you approach it from the middle ground, and you approach it from the ground, and then you build it from the ground up. That is how it is going to work. So to this degree, MDAs, like you said correctly, should enforce the Nigerian first policy in schools, in institutions. Yeah, I'll use the word enforce, not superimpose, but enforce. Of course, the president has spinned it in such a way that if you decide to go for a foreign product, you're going to pay a premium to get it. But for a local product, yeah, it pretty much comes in cheap, and then it's handy, and then it's much available. You understand? And also, away from that, the manufacturers of this local product also has to be very sensitive to the people's need. Because if I want to go for a product, if I see a foreign product here and then I see a local product, it has to match up. Like, I have to be able to say, okay, yeah, I can depend on the quality of this item I want to take. Then it gives you it gives you confidence to want to go for the Nigerian first way. So I like something Reno Omokri does. A lot of people might not like him, but like something he does, you'd hardly ever see him wear anything that is not Nigerian. As a matter of fact, some things you feel is Nigerian, he would argue that no, this is from this country and that country and everything. And then, so that mindset is what we want to see. We have a lot of schools that wear foreign uniforms. So how do we ensure that our schools across all board wear uniforms that are traditional attires? Of course, that would also mean that we need to scale up our production lines. The textile factories, and then the cotton factories, and then the growing, all those things. So it starts from a back end. You don't put a finished furniture on the back end. You only see furniture that you want to sell in the showroom. So there's a back end and then there's a front end. Yeah, so the back end is, let's talk to our local manufacturers, and then let's begin to ingest, like what the president is doing, injecting funds so that we can have some local manufacturing, local production and everything. That would automatically make people lean towards Nigeria, locally produced items and stuff like that. You understand? So basically, it's everybody's responsibility. The decision is in schools, in families. Let's encourage people to do more of Nigerian items, Nigerian products, and
but there's just about a range. And why I say so, consumables, yes. Consumables in terms of what we wear, what we eat, it's possible to do Nigeria first. But when we look at the industrial gap, especially with the notice given to the Bureau of Public Procurement, you look at some of the machineries. Take this to you, for instance. You look at the cameras we use. I can't point out one or two or three companies where these are manufactured in Nigeria. It almost puts us at the lower rung of the scale. Do you think so?
Absolutely, it does.
How can we get it better?
Okay, so I think it's called phasing. So what we need to do is, and that's what His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is doing, is trying to phase it gradually. So we don't, at the time, I think the government came and banned importation. Now, we're no longer doing importation. Of course, there was a ripple effect, and then he had to scale back on the policy. He had to double down. So the truth of the matter is we have to, phase it. And then here's how it works. Of course, we would begin to produce locally, and then allow people to import and do whatever it is they want to do. And then after a while, we begin to scale up the production gradually. So let me give you an example. Rice production, for instance. Before now, nearly all the rice in the local market were imported. Right now, what happened? The government came and then encouraged farmers, encouraged Nigerians to produce rice in mass. And before you know what happened, anywhere you get to now, you see Nigerian locally produced rice. You understand? It didn't happen in one day. Rome was not built in a day.
But you talked about government responsibility. Part of the 10 points under the Nigeria First policy is government-led initiatives. You reference a politician moving in convoy. We have local manufacturers who make beautiful automobiles in Nigeria. Would you say that the government and its government-led initiative is leading by using made-in-Nigerian vehicles?
I would say yes, and I would say no. Here's why. I've seen the military use Innocent brands before. I've seen quite a couple of people use Innocent brands and everything. everything. But you see, the responsibility of the government is to encourage innocence and many more people like that. I know that, of course, we see some little bit of manufacturing or assembling, automobile assembling plants cropping up across the country here and there and everything. But, the president is trying to pump in more money towards that direction so that we can begin to manufacture things. And I give it to Nigeria. Nigerians are extremely intelligent. We now see, recently, I think I was reading about a school in Sokoto where a group of teenagers created, I think, a drone, a massive drone, I think a drone or a helicopter or something like that. And then they produce everything locally, all produced in Nigeria. And I'm like, wow, this is very ingenious. So the government needs to encourage people like that. So that truth of the matter is Nigerians are very ingenious. Once the government creates an enabling environment for them to be able to produce things like that, not just that, sponsor them, you'll find that the narrative is going to change. A gentleman called, I think, his name is Maurice Acting or something. He's a Taiwanese. So what he did was he traveled to the US and then he was studying in the US and then traveled back to Taiwan, and he started a Taiwanese semiconductor conducting manufacturing company, TSM, IC or something like that, and within a space of 10 years, this guy, an individual, is generating almost the same GDP. That's just one company in Taiwan. Is generating I think he's doing 200 billion US dollars in GDP.
Now this brings us to the subject of technology transfer and skill development. It's also supposed to be part of the Nigerian First, but it's also in its implementation. How does this trickle down across different facets of governance to ensure that there is indeed technology transfer and skill development?
The president is already doing it. I saw a $51 billion technological hub that I think Japan and Nigeria has just signed. 51 billion. You can imagine that. It's a tech hub, an innovative tech hub that would encourage startups. It's specifically for startup and entrepreneurs. You understand? You see, projects like that are littered across the country.
How do we measure the buy-in from Nigerians to these beautiful initiatives? How do we measure and evaluate that indeed this policy is translating into the much needed buy-in?
So certainly it is, because there are young people in droves are taking advantage of those opportunities. The tech hubs, the one done by the Ministry of, I think the Ministry of Bosun Tijani, his ministry.
Digital
innovation. Yeah, I mean, in thousands of them. And you have those hubs in different countries. I think recently a very good friend of mine, Mr. Ayfasan, I just finished with, I think, 5,000 youths in Yaradua Center, where they put the youths together, teach them nitty-gritty of tech and innovation, how to do a website, how to, coding here and there and stuff like that. You see, now it's just kind of like it's a startup. You see, what happens is, you see, what the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is doing is basically lifting up the foundation of this country and trying to reset the foundation so that they can be a proper growth bottom up. So you might not see the immediate effect of these policies, but give it time. A year, 2, 3, 4 years, you begin to see that these things will matter a lot. Look at what happened in India. All of a sudden, India just focused on tech. Now they import tech from India to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars added to their GDP because young people keyed into those policies. And then before you know what happened, in 5 years, the tables turned around.
Now you've talked about the onus resting in line with leadership. Currently in Nigeria, there is the question of audits and probes of the activities of MDAs, particularly also within the Nigerian First policy. There's a need for audit and revisions of procurement plans. But in some cases where we find agencies of governments erring in that regard, how do we ensure that Nigerians can hold government accountable?
Okay, so there are some policies of government that would automatically erase that narrative. So I'll give you one instance, the BVN. I was arguing with somebody and then, wanted to do a visa interview. And then so the person basically gave a false information about her financial record and everything. So I'm like, why did you do that? And then she was like, oh, I mean, this is just, I'm like, see, let me tell you something. There's a unified process right now. That with your BVN alone, there's no way you want to go. You are going to be named in the board. You understand? So basically, little innovations like that helps the government across board to be able to track the excesses. Right now, I'm sure you're familiar with the tax reform that is currently ongoing. One of the beautiful things, as far as I am concerned, about the tax reform is this, that even the spendings will be tracked through the BVN. So whatever you spend, if you want to he said even if you are paying in cash, it's going to be tracked via the receipts that are printed and everything. You understand? So we are seeing an injection of those little policies, and particularly because the globe is becoming more digitized. So maybe in a little while from now, you will find out that you will not be able to hide anymore. I know Nigerians are very, very skillful when it comes to bypassing policies and stuff like that. But of course, it might not erase completely, but it would drastically reduce, particularly with the age of technology and AI.
Now, I'm hoping that for the benefits of our viewers at home, we'll look at one of the revenue generating agencies of government, because they've been able to take to social media and itemize some of the policies based on trade and economics of the current administration. Now, one of the top-notch ones is trade facilitation and industrial support. It's still with the much worry that the national single window is yet to be implemented, and thereby leaves gaps for over the tune of $8 billion to be lost, which could have been better addressed by this trade facilitation and industrial support. What are some of the reasons why you feel this is dragging in its implementation?
It's simple. It's just people. It's sabotage. That's what I would say. It's sabotage. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Because you know that change is not easy. We've been like this for many years, and then you want to just come and change the system all of a sudden, people will fight back. Remember what Okunje-Iweala said, when you fight corruption, it's definitely going to fight back. You understand? So there's a lot of resistance to the change coming in right now. It's a move that can never be stopped. It's a move that can never be stopped. Particularly, you see, young people are at the heart of the digital age, and there's a way behind the scene they begin to shape the narrative. You understand? So regardless of what you feel, what any politician, anybody sitting in any of the MDAs think, it is going to catch up. Yesterday, I was listening to His Excellency, the Minister of Aviation, and he was talking about how that they're trying to renovate the airport for a lot of money, is causing a lot of buzz in the country. And he said something remarkable, that some of those facilities that we used in building the Lagos airport, we can't even buy the products in the market anymore. They are so old. They are not even producing those things in the market. You can't even do maintenance on them. That is exactly what the government is going to come to. At the end of the day, there are some certain things you will not be able to do anymore after a while. By the time you put everything together, you find out that, do you know that if the BVN alone reduced the corruption index drastically, just that little one solution, how much more the other ones that are going to join? You understand?
But looking at reports, we're told that there are about 66 million BVNs.
Well, that also goes back to policy enforcement and policy communication. It also goes back there. You see, if you don't make it impossible...
Beg your pardon, I'll redress that.
Yep.
66 million BVN-linked accounts. So it's not that we don't have more than 66 million accounts, but those that are currently linked to BVN are 66 million. And we have a population of well over 200 million. We have more than 66 MDAs. There have been issues, particularly if I remind you, with the humanitarian ministry, procurements with money sent to private accounts, and remember all of this.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so basically, it's a follow-through gap. Once you create a policy and then you see it work a little bit and you want to pull back, it doesn't work that way. There has to be a follow-through all the way through. So if you don't make it impossible for anybody to be able to do anything without the BVN, then it's just like the voters card. I particularly think, excuse me to digress a little bit, that once you are 18 years old, you don't even need to go queue and go and be looking for somebody anywhere and then queue for donkey days or hours to get a PVC. Once you're 18 years old, regardless of the hospital you're born, your BVN is going to be attached to your birth certificate. Your voter's card is going to be attached to your birth certificate, and then it's going to be given to you. Of course, birth certificate at birth, but once you turn 18, you can walk as a child. You can walk into it and say, "Can I have my PVC?" Is that simple and that easy? But there is no follow through. That's where the gap is. You create a policy and then it works a little bit, and then you want to pull back. Once there's no follow through, you would find things like that. So here's what I think should be done. I think the system, the financial system should be unified in such a way that it would be impossible for anybody to do any transaction. And it also needs to go to the locals.
This brings us to the policy on open governance and institutional transparency. Yes, there is a Freedom of Information Act.
Yes.
But would you say in your fair assessments that the agencies of governments are actually practicing open governance and institutional transparency?
No, I wouldn't say that. Yeah, because again, there's a huge gap in communication within the government agencies. A huge gap. I think in Estonia, you can basically get any database from the country with just your phone. There's absolutely nothing, no information about government or anybody in government in Estonia that you cannot get. On just one tap of your phone, boom, the information is all over your face. You understand? So the two ways is, first of all, is the upload side and then the download side. Yeah, so the MDAs, it comes back to policy. It comes back to policy. If you have a leader that insists that, you know what, we want all government processes to be digitized, you still go to agencies, AGIS, FCDA, go to the secretariat. People still carry files from one office to another. All you need to do as a leader, you know what, I think, I call all the ministers to get everybody seats. Going forward, I give you 3 months. I do not want to see a single paper in your agency anymore. I rise. And then 3 months come, you visit everybody comes together. So give me a report. Oh, you're still having struggling. Okay, I extend by 1 more month. If you have a leader that has that zeal and drive to follow that policy through, the problem solved for life.
So you believe a bane of our transparency needs to be on digitization of human interfaces across MDAs?
It has to, because the world is exactly what is happening to the world right now. Now, very soon, you'll see flooded in the Nigerian market vehicles that you don't even need a driver for. You'll be able to use your phone. Right now, there are some things you can do on your phone without even touching it. If you are if you are technologically savvy, my kids would do stuff on my phone and I'm like, whoa, what did you just do right there? Some people communicate with their phones. Some people, their phones communicate with them. There are phones you can hold that can tell you your blood pressure, that can tell you need to drink water right now, that can tell you need to do this right now. So if these things are happening, it's just a matter, it will catch up with the government. Either this administration does that or not, trust me, the Nigeria of today has grown beyond some levels in the past. And you see, those processes will catch up.
Now, in conclusion, the policy of government, most persons have been very critical, particularly with this administration, is what many say is a lack of blueprint, an economic blueprint that has timelines to it. As a communication strategist, how important is that in being able to carry Nigerians along on the journey which we are on, and when to be able to begin to expect deliverable outcomes?
So again, it goes back to leadership. Yeah, it goes back to leadership. If anything that you see prospect in, you're most likely going to be interested in it. So it goes back to the leadership and the leadership way of communicating those policies to people. Of course, you come up with a blueprint. It's not just enough to come up with a blueprint. If the blueprint does not appeal, or I would say if the blueprint does not address the need, the real need of the people, the blueprint is most likely not going to be honored. It's not going to be respected. It's not going to be followed through. That's the challenge. So in creating that kind of blueprint, for instance, a good product will always sell itself. Once you have a very good product, you don't need to do a lot of marketing. People will naturally embrace it. So it's all about leadership.
Well, thank you, Ayinde Olalekan, for taking our time to join us on this conversation this morning.
Thank you for having me.